Doing today? Welcome to my photography live stream where we talk about photography and I like the audience to drive the conversation. So it's also an open Q&A. So if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And also it's a chance for us to catch up as a community, group of photographers and talk about photography and what's been going on. Excuse me one second. Hopefully the audio and video is okay. I had a little trouble getting started this morning, so sorry for the late start, but hopefully things will go smoothly from here. And I want to thank everyone that's here for joining me this morning. It's greatly appreciated. And as always, you can always subscribe, like, make donations, become a member. All of that good stuff is, again, greatly appreciated. So I guess we'll just start with Darko. It looks like got a lot of stuff there in the chat. Let me open up my chat window. And let's see. Say good morning, Mr. Trek. Hope all is well. Things are going well, thanks. I hope things are good for you. Big plans for the Nikon mirrorless barn. A Z7 may be arriving. Oh, that's cool. And your first foray into 24 megapixels. I think the Z7 is a 47 megapixel. And then the next, I'm sorry, I guess I should show these on the screen. I don't know that megapixel is not the only factor, as my Z52 does just fine, but exciting nonetheless. Yep. Question, your DF Classic, what or how would you rate the AF accuracy compared to the EM1? Are they on par? Yeah, I mean, it's slow, relatively speaking, uh, but it's fine. I mean, it's fast enough for single shots and continuous shooting. The shutter frames per second on the shutter is not very fast. It's probably like 5 or 6 frames. I don't remember what it is. I never use it like that. But for just point and shoot, yeah, it's perfectly fine. I'd say it's pretty close. Nothing to worry about. It's the kind of camera you slow down and do photography. It's not a sports action camera. And says you might have a chance on a DF as well. That's why I'm asking. Okay. Uh, yeah, if you already have a lens lineup for it, and you can buy lenses pretty cheap. Like I would recommend. I think it's the 24 to 85 VR. It's kind of a kit lens, I guess. I don't remember what came as kits on that camera, but uh, it's a lens that I bought last year, and I love that lens. It's great. So mainly because the DF doesn't have image stabilization, but you have a little bit built in the lens. It helps a little bit, but you still want to follow the reciprocal rule and all of that. But I think the DF is a little pricey for what it is, right? I mean, we can say that about just any camera, really. But I'm trying to think. It has the Nikon D4 sensor in it. So if all you're worried about is like the image quality, you'll get the same thing out of a D4, and you can probably buy that for less than the DF, and it's a much more capable camera. Uh, if you just want something small, compact, and a D4 sensor, then DF makes sense. And it's a wonderful camera. It has sort of a vintage look to it too, especially when you put old classic D lenses on it. You get that classic rendering, right? Very busy, so bubbly bokeh and all the imperfections that these older D film camera era lenses had. And let's see, Bob O'Neill says, "Hi, Rob Darko. My OM3 sits there looking at me with its big eye, silently asking to be taken for a walk. I've called her Ellie." Well, Ellie is very flattered. Yeah, I love my OM3. I picked up a new lens for it. And that's the thumbnail of this stream, actually. It's the 25 millimeter f4 for the Pen F film camera. Now, I do have the 24 millimeter f 2.8 that was made for the OM system film cameras, like the OM1, OM2, etc. But those are full frame lenses, and you're sort of taking the sweet spot of the lens because it's cropped in, basically in the center. But with this lens, this was designed for half frame. So I'm using most of the lens's image circle to capture the image. And I really liked how I have a 38 millimeter f 1.8 pen f lens, and I really liked how that renders. I just love it, very vintage look. So I wanted to get the same thing for the get a wider focal length. And so this is a 25, so I get a 50 millimeter equivalent. I thought about getting the 20 millimeter pen f lens, but it was double the price. I got this one for steel. I only paid with tax and delivery and everything like $105, something like that, less than that. And also, I like the more compact size, because the Pen F was, the original film camera, uh, had a very short flange distance, so hence the actual adapter ring for the Pen F lenses is very thin, so it doesn't really add any size to the camera. In fact, this lens looks a little small on this camera, but now this camera looks totally legit vintage, right? And I've been asked more than a few times, is this a film camera? And I'm like, no, no, it's digital. And I just love this camera. It does everything. This is probably, I would say, the very best camera I have bought in the 10, 11. Wow, it's been 12 years now since I started doing photography. This is the very best camera in every way. Uh, and I take it out. This is my go-to for everything. Now, I'm not saying that all my other cameras back there don't have their own charm and characteristics that make, so that I can still enjoy those as well. But if I could only have one camera, and I think was it 1 month, two cameras? The creator over there, she one of my peers, she calls it her desert island camera, and she has a great video on the OM3, by the way. But uh, I'd have to agree. This is my desert island camera. This is the one camera that I would use, that I would want to have with me if this was the only camera I could have. And everything else could go away, and I would hardly miss them anymore. Even and that includes the Pen F Digital, my original Pen F camera. I wouldn't miss it at all with this new one. So yeah, this is I might have to do my own video on this. I haven't really done a video about this camera at all. There's so many great videos out there. I'm like, what could I really add to it other than, you know, uh saying the same thing over and over again. I can't think of anything that hasn't already been said about this camera, and I think it's doing really well with for OM systems. At least I hope it is, because it's a fabulous camera. It has, if you're into that vintage style, it really has everything going for it. And yeah, I love this camera, and I love how these Pen F lenses look on them. This is I'm gonna go out and shoot. And another thing I'm doing is I'm developing some recipes for it because by request. I'm not really into recipes personally. I just prefer to edit and post, maybe use Nick Collection if I want a vintage film look, or even use the film pack from DxO. But I'm more of a purist when it comes to my photography. I like to capture it, generally speaking, uh, as authentic as possible. I'd say 80% of the time, but there's that other 20% where, yeah, I like to throw in a Nick Collection preset, just to give it just to give it a little flair sometimes. But uh, I'm working on one now that is based off a Fujifilm recipe that somebody posted online, and one of my viewers asked me to try to reproduce it, and I think I have for the most part. I was able to reproduce it. the key thing, the key challenge, or I should say, the primary challenge to mimicking Fujifilm simulations is there's no way to directly adjust the hue, like shift the hue, I should say. So if I want the blues to be a little bit more teal, then yeah, that's hard to do in camera with the Pen F or with the OM3 and Pen F. Uh, even doing slight shifts to the white balance, you can do it if you shift the white balance, right? You can shift the amber, green, blue, magenta, whatever. But then that changes every color, right? It shifts every color in the image, and that's not what Fujifilm does. Fujifilm does slight shifts with their Chrome FX effects and other things that they have that you don't have direct control over hue, right? Shifting the hue, but they have certain controls like the Chrome FX or Chrome FX Blue that does kind of give it a little shift in the blues to a more teal kind of look. And I've created presets in Workspace because Workspace allows you to shift the hues that give a very cinematic orange and teal kind of preset to it. But anyhow, I'm working on it, and I'm gonna make. I have two new presets I'm working on. I'm gonna call them Chrome FX1 and Chrome FX2. Chrome FX1 is going to be a very close simulation, film simulation. So it gives you that filmic kind of look. And Chrome FX2 is going to be the same color science, but with grain. Uh, because there's no grain setting for the color. It'd have been nice if they added that, but there's no grain setting for color profiles, unlike the monochrome profiles on the OM3 and Pen F. So basically, all I'm doing in Chrome FX2 is, setting the ISO to 3200 and higher, right? And turning the sharpness up to +2, so that grain, that noise, it sort of imitates grain. Whereas in Chrome FX1, I actually dial the sharpness back to -1 to give the image a little bit softer look, similar to film would be, and then you can use any ISO you want. That's just going to be strictly auto ISO, or you can shoot a manual, whatever. But yeah, so I'm working on that, and I did one a couple of months back that I called, I think, just Chrome, and that one is based off Kodachrome 64. I think I called it Chrome 64, but it's based off a film simulation, not a Fujifilm simulation, but based off the actual Kodak film. Now, it's nowhere near close to actual film, right? But it does have a very distinct look to it that is film-like. And that one, I started with a baseline that I got off MU43 forums. Somebody started a thread there with that specific color file, and I've since tweaked it a little bit more uh, to get just to get a little bit closer because I based my Chrome simulation, Kodachrome 64 simulation off DxO's film pack for Kodachrome 64 rather than the rather than what somebody did in MU43 forum. And again, I got it pretty close, but it varies a lot, image to image to image. Certain images it looks pretty close to the actual Kodachrome 64. And then in other shots, depending what's in the scene and the white balance and all of that, it doesn't look anything like Kodachrome 64, but it still has that vintage kind of look to it. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I was trying to do with that film simulation. I have that posted somewhere on my community tab on YouTube here. But I'm gonna make two new ones because it was a viewer request to make Chrome simulation based off what this other YouTuber did, and it was interesting. his thought process to create this simulation. And he does one additional step where he adds a diffusion filter like uh, onto the lens to give the image just a little more bloom and a more vintage look to it. Because our autofocus lenses are so clinically sharp sometimes that you kind of lose that feeling, right? So he added a mist filter in addition to some other adjustments that are Fujifilm specific, but I got it pretty close. Like I said, on a single image, the exception being is the simulation that on the Fujifilm, it does push the blues to be a little bit more teal. And that's one thing I was not able to do on uh, the OM3 because we don't have control over that and we don't have any special things. So what I did instead was is I desaturated the blues a little bit more to just make them slightly more pastel-y, right? Because if you take a picture of a rich blue sky, that's one thing. But if you desaturate it a little bit, it gives it just a little softer look. Not quite pastel. Pastel is a little different in that you're kind of adding white or increasing the luminance of the blue, but I can't increase the luminance of the blue directly. So I just desaturate a little bit and then I push the highlights on the tone curve. Anyway, uh, I am putting a lot of thought into these film simulations and I'll talk about them maybe in a video. Um, but it seems like a lot of people want recipes for the OM3, which is exciting, just like they did for the Pen F when it came out. But the OM3, I feel like there's a little bit more demand. Uh, is the feeling I'm getting. So I'm working on that. Anyhow, I jibber jabbered enough about that. Let me get back to the chat here. And oh, Marco's here. Hey, Marco and Roger. Good morning. Good morning, Roger. Good to see you. Good morning, Marco. Peter. Good morning. Did you try Lifetime for infrared? I did not. Uh, I haven't. I just haven't had time. And I could have yesterday. But it rained yesterday. It's hard, for infrared, you really need a sunny day. And so, you know, it's like astrophotography. It has to be kind of the perfect storm, right? You have to have free time. The weather has to be right. And let's see. But I will. But lifetime makes sense, right? To use for infrared. But I have to try it. I haven't tried it. And let's see. Henning is here from Germany. Hello. Thank you. I hope you have a great day too. And Paul says, watching you live. Oh, hey, Paul, while processing bird pictures from going out on the water. That's awesome. Hope you got two screens. So you got me in one and you're editing on the other. And I want to confirm that the G9 Mark II does great with wildlife. Yes, I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I mean, really, if there's any differences between OM3 say, or OM systems and Panasonic, their latest flagship cameras. This is very subtle. Really, the difference is going to be in the person using the camera and how successful they are, right? And having shot 135 format film SLRs for decades, I really appreciate the superior grip of most modern bodies like the Lumix G9. To remove this useful feature just to look more vintage makes no sense. Most things that are, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. But it's not aesthetics. It's something similar to the word aesthetics. But when they design cameras for certain aesthetics, there's usually a compromise in ergonomics, right? So uh, that's that's just a design choice, and I like it, but I did buy a grip, just a little bit of a grip for mine. There's just a little bit. This is the smallest, not the smallest, but this is just right. The only thing the grip does for me, it doesn't really help me with handling this way so much because, you hold the camera with your left hand or the lens with your left hand mostly, so your right hand can navigate the controls and push the shutter button. But mainly what this grip does for me is, yeah, occasionally I'll shoot one-handed, so that's a lot easier with that little bit of a grip there. But mainly it's so when I'm holding the camera one-handed and not taking photos, I can just hold the camera securely. Uh, because without this grip here, I would have to really grip tightly to hold the camera like this to my side. But with this grip, so if I'm trying to hold the camera this way, it's like, yeah, see, I'm getting white knuckled and my fingers are red because, I there's no grip. But with a little bit of grip, I'm more relaxed and I can hold the camera very securely without worrying about it slipping from my hand when I'm not taking photos. But then when I'm taking photos, it's always right this way. Um, but when I'm shooting birding, right, when I'm doing birding, I have taken this out for birding, and I'll probably continue to despite this not having a grip. But having the OM1 with a nice grip on it did make a difference because uh, it's just a lot more comfortable because I'm always when I'm hand holding and birding, I got the 300 f4 and I'm going around and I got a death grip on both the lens and the camera and I'm going around shooting. It's way easier with the OM1. Even when I'm on a gimbal, it's easier when you have a nice grip. You get a little more precision in, just because I'm used to it. But uh, so yeah, from an ergonomic perspective, it makes no sense to design cameras this way, right? Uh, but it's all about the aesthetics, and that's always going to be the case in everything, not just cameras, but everything, right? Okay, but I'm with you on the grip. It is nicer to have a comfortable grip. It's what sold me actually on the EM1 Mark II when I got it was the M1 Mark II, the M1 Mark III were the most comfortable cameras I've ever held. The OM1 lost a little bit in terms of comfort for me, mainly because of the back where the palm rests. The OM1 is more squared off. The EM1 and EM1 Mark II and Mark III, that back corner where your palm rests has a slight angle to it, so it feels a little more comfortable. And that's also why I like the Canon R8 over all of the R series Canons. All of the other R series Canons, they don't have that really comfortable, not as comfortable as the R8. The R8 is, more compact to begin with, so that helps. But if you look at the R8, the M1 Mark II and 3, where the palm, where your palm rests, having that little bit of an edge or angle in makes a huge difference in the comfort for me. Darko says 50 megapixel medium format compared to 50 megapixel full frame pixel density aside. What is your opinion on sensor types and image quality and case use? Okay. Uh, the key advantage to medium format, and you said pixel density aside, but that is the only advantage. That pixel density makes a big difference in the basically the dynamic range of the sensor, right, and the noise level. So you're going to get much less noise with a 50 megapixel full frame, I'm sorry, medium format versus full frame, and more dynamic range, inherently more dynamic range because you can shoot at lower ISOs and adjust in post because you're going to have less noise. So that's the main difference. But if you're shooting at normal ISOs, between base ISO and 6400, I would argue even 12,000. But let's say you're in a normal range, right? I don't think it matters full frame or medium format. You can post process and get a terrific image either way. But if you start pushing shadows and trying to pull highlights, then the medium format's going to win every time because of the pixel density. Number two, uh, where was I going with this? You're not going to see any difference in resolution or image quality in general between the two. So I keep looking at medium format, the GFX 50, the GFX 100, uh, and I talk myself out of it every time because I'm like, I don't really shoot at extremes and I don't push my post processing more than a couple of stops, and that's extreme for me. Usually I'm only sliding things, one stop at most. You rarely see me if you watch my photo editing streams. That's those aren't my images, but generally speaking, a well-exposed image, I rarely have to make adjustments more than one stop anywhere in the image, whether I'm adjusting locally or globally. If you underexpose or overexpose the image, uh, then that's where the dynamic range and having the bigger pixels will help you. But I would say 99% of my pictures are not over or underexposed. I usually get the exposure that I want. If I want it overexposed, I'll overexpose it. If I want it underexposed, I'll underexpose it with no intent to bring it back up in post processing, with very, very few exceptions. Uh, but yeah, and there's the argument about the medium format can do 16-bit RAW versus, say, 14 or 12-bit. And again, you will get a tiny bit more dynamic range out of a 14 or 16-bit image, but you're only going to see that if you have to push the image more than a couple of stops. And then at that point, I feel like, the shot is the shot can be saved, but not so much more. It's not going to be that much. Basically, what I'm saying, you take a 12-bit raw image versus a 16-bit raw image. Yeah, you're going to get more dynamic range and better shadow recovery with less noise, better highlight recovery. But it's very subtle difference in the real world with a properly exposed image, and I just don't see it myself. Uh, I've never shot with a medium format myself personally, so I'm basing my opinion here on files that I've downloaded, raw files that I've downloaded from other sites of the GFX 100 and also the Hasselblads, and post-process them. And I'm like, it's not that big a difference. The most important thing with the two formats really is what lenses are going to use on it, because you can have a great lens on a full frame camera, like any of the Leica L mount glass, the S series, so good. They have Pro series too, but even S series, which are they're not entry level, but they're normal lenses. The image quality is so good, and it's kind of I don't see the same. I watched a video actually this morning where I think they used the 45 f 2.8 prime for the GFX. It was the 45. I forget the aperture it was, but it wasn't as sharp as the Sony. They were using a Sony G Master lens. And when you pixel peep the two images side by side, the Sony 60 megapixel full frame camera next to the 100 megapixel GFX, the Sony was sharper, and that's completely due to the lens. So I think finding a lens that can resolve 100 megapixels, even with the larger pixel density of the medium format, is going to be challenging and very expensive. Whereas you can get by with a Lumix L mount glass 50 millimeter, I guarantee that's going to be every bit as sharp as, their general lenses that they have for the GFX set. So I wouldn't worry about it. I'm done chasing megapixels. I've done it. I have the Fuji 40 megapixel, I have the Sony 60 megapixel, uh, and ultimately it 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 was a pain in the butt, because the file sizes are so large. And I'm not seeing really any difference in image quality unless I pixel peep down to 400% and say, okay, yeah, now I can see the tiny little hairs underneath Ellie's eyes. There's a little bit more fine detail. But when you frame the image, like from her chest up, you can't see the difference, at least not the way I deliver things. Now, if you're doing art reproduction, product photography, uh, these kind of genres where they do need the flexibility of that extra resolution, because a lot of times they're going to crop in, they're going to look at certain areas, like in artwork, they might look at the brush strokes and they'll need to crop in, and you will need that extra fine detail that a high resolution sensor can give you. Product photography, same thing. Typically, it's going to go through an agency or whatever, and the client will also want the flexibility to be able to crop into certain parts of that product and show that detail. So these kind of applications make sense for very high resolution. And yeah, I get, our cameras have high res shot mode, but that doesn't cut it. You need the pixels, you need the sharp lens, you need that whole workflow from the gear all the way through the post processing and then the final delivered content. That workflow has to be really streamlined and perfected. What and that's not my focus at all. I'm out to enjoy photography and all the features that we have, which includes high res shot mode. I love high res shot mode and getting that little bit extra detail. um, and I do that a lot with not a lot, but I do it with my panoramas time to time. And I'll do single shot handheld high res shot mode. I did some yesterday, in fact. Maybe I'll share some images I did this weekend. And these. So I enjoy all of these things, but I'm just so done with chasing megapixels and dynamic range and shallow depth of field. All the brainwashing that we see on YouTube about cameras, lenses, gear. It's ultimately it doesn't help your photography, and to help you capture, or it doesn't really make much difference in the overall quality of your image. What makes the difference is the content of your image, right? So, uh, and I'm not telling you anything new. I'm not going to go on a rant about it. Everybody knows that. I think that's here. But it is frustrating when I watch, a lot of videos, and as a new buyer, somebody, I'm thinking back to when I bought my first interchangeable lens camera, the Sony NEX. I was a total gear spec checklist type guy, right? I didn't know anything about photography other than doing snapshots, right, with a pocket camera. So I always said, I want the latest, most advanced technology. I want the highest image quality. I want, all of the features. Back then, the NEX 6, they had a app store where you could download apps for it and to expand the camera's capabilities. So I looked at all of these things, and then I looked at the price point because I was actually looking back then at an EM1 Mark I, and they wanted like $1,100 or something for it. And I did had no bias against Micro Four Thirds or APS-C or full frame. I had no bias either way. Full frame cameras are just so expensive, so I ruled them out. So I was looking at APS-C and the M1 Mark I, uh, and ultimately I bought the Sony with lens for $400 cheaper than body alone of EM1 Mark I. Even though I liked everything about the EM1 Mark I, because of all the feature sets that it had. It was mainly came down to price, and I was able to get the Sony uh, for like $300 or $400 less with the kit lens. And that's then having that geeky side of being able to download apps and expand the camera capabilities. So I said, okay, well, I can download one of their apps and maybe get some of the features that the M1 Mark I had. Uh, and I only used the Sony for about a year before I didn't like it. And I really enjoyed the DSLR experience. So I bought a Nikon D7200, I believe. That was my first DSLR. The 7100, I'm sorry, D7100. It just come out about a year after. And I went full DSLR all the way up to the D750 until I switched back to Micro Four Thirds. Not back to, but switched to Micro Four Thirds as my primary camera system. And I've been happy camper ever since. And to this day, like I said in the beginning of the stream, this is probably the best camera I've ever bought in the 12 years that I've been doing photography. For me, in every way. For me, this has been the best camera. You always have to have that caveat, right? I can't say it's the best camera because it's not. It's the best camera for me, right? There's no such thing as the best camera. There's only the best camera for you, right? If I want a different look, such as filmesque. Oh, boy, that was part of your original question that I just jibber jabbered about. Don't worry about it. I think what makes the filmesque look, that nostalgic kind of look, is really the color science that you can apply and the lenses. Getting the lenses and exactly why I bought this lens, right? Because I wanted to get more of a vintage look. And already, it just came in last night. So I only have a couple of pictures of my backyard if I wanted to show you what it looks like. I don't have any actual pictures yet with it. But I can show you some with the 38 millimeter, which is a vintage Pen F lens. Those came out beautiful. I may have showed those last week. I don't know. It's really going to come down to the lenses, but a digital camera uh, will never be film. Film is a whole different format and has its own very distinctive look to it that I don't think can be really reproduced digitally consistently. Can you take one film image and make a digital copy? We do it people do it every day by scanning their film, right? Because we're taking film and making it digital. But what I'm referring to is, can you take an image of film and make a copy, take the same picture with a digital camera and make it look exactly like the film? Short answer is yes, you can do that on a single image. Trying to do that consistently, say out of 36 images, let's not even talk about thousands of images that you can do on a digital daily, right? Just trying to do it with any number of images, it's virtually impossible to do it shot to shot to shot. Every shot is going to be different with film and digital. Now you can eventually tweak things back, but film has and digital to some extent, but digital is more flexible. But film has a very distinct response depending on the film stock, to color, right? It may be more sensitive to red, and this film stock is more sensitive to blue, or this film stock's, uh, richer, more saturated. So there's a lot of different kinds of film out there, and yeah, you can probably create a single image that in digital that'll always look like that film, look exactly like that film. But then when you take your next picture, you turn the corner. Let's say you're doing street photography, you turn the corner, you take another picture. You're not going to be able to use the same presets or same settings on the digital camera or in post processing. You just cannot. You're going to have to recalibrate all of your settings for that new image to make it look exactly like that film. So when I say that digital will never look like film, I'm talking about in the context of, shot to shot to shot. Not, I'm not saying that you can't make a single image look exactly like the film image. You can with post-processing, but if you take 36 images on a film camera with, say, Kodachrome 64, then you take 36 shots on a, Fujifilm camera with a Chrome film simulation recipe, they're going to be completely different. All 36 shots are not going to look alike. Not at all. Uh, you may get one that's really close or even identical, but I guarantee the other 35 shots are not going to look like each other. Okay. Uh, and let's see, I completely agree that ergonomics is imperative. If you don't have that, it is not comfortable in your hand. I noticed Rob got a third-party grip. Yes. So yeah, so I've talked about that. The grip does make a big difference. Um, I guess from my perspective, I have so many cameras that if I want to use a comfortable camera, I'll get my OM1. Uh, for example, like the Nikon DF, not comfortable at all to hold. Tiny grip on it, similar to the one that I bought for my OM3, but just enough for me to just carry the camera without worrying about dropping it. I always use a strap anyway, but still. Uh, Sometimes I have to take the camera off my neck to get to low angle shot. And holding the camera this way for those low angle vertical shots, it's a lot easier with a grip than it is without. And I do that a lot. And Merchants of Misery, I'm just popping in to say good on this guy for sharing his knowledge via videos and live. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I try. And then, oops, film effects are best achieved in post, and DxO is the best tool for that. I would also agree with that. Again, it's always subjective, right? But DxO knows color, right? And if they make a film simulation like in their film pack, they're going to do the best they can, but it's not the same. But they do it better than anyone else. I would have to say that. Three screens. Oh man, you're ready to be a day trader here, if you're not already. And then you got charts up on all three screens, and then your primary screen, you're doing all your trades. I did that once. Lost a lot of money. Not enough to go broke or risk any, like financially go bankrupt, but I did drain my account to where I said, I'm not doing this anymore. Stupid. And Linda O'Rourke says, Good morning, Rob. Quick question. Why or would you choose an OM3 over an OM1 Mark II, given they are priced similarly? Just for the nostalgia feature. That's all. Simply for the aesthetics. The OM1 Mark II, and I would argue even the OM1 Mark I is superior in every way to the OM3, especially the OM1 Mark II. Uh, when we're talking about features and capability, the OM1 Mark II is a more capable camera, and certainly I would say more durable because it's all black. It's not like this, bare metal. This might even be painted. I don't know, but this is not comfortable to hold so much. And one specific feature I know it doesn't have is the buffer is half the size as the OM1 Mark II. It's about almost the same as the OM1 Mark I. I think the Mark I has a little better buffer in it, but the frame buffer is 200 plus frames on an OM1 Mark II, and it's only like 80 something on this one. So that's one thing. Another thing is the image stabilization is much better. It's a full stop better than this camera, at least a full stop. And the mechanical shutter also, there's a big difference. I think you can do 10 frames per second on the OM1s. You can only do like maybe 6 on this one. So that's what I mean by it being better in every way than the OM3. It has those cameras just have better features or better capability than the OM3. So the only reason to choose the OM3 is because of how it looks, right? And it is theoretically a smaller, lighter camera. I can fit this in my bag a little easier than the OM1, and I can maybe squeeze things in more comfortably in a bag. But ultimately, I'm not fitting a whole nother lens in the bag if I take the OM3 versus the OM1. So if I have the OM1 here and the OM3 here, and I'm packing the same identical bag, it's not like the bag with the OM3 in it can take an extra lens or an extra flash, maybe an extra battery, okay? But there's not that much difference in size. Not a meaningful difference is what I should say. On paper, yeah, it's like 100 grams difference, which, is a lot actually. But in practice, when you're packing your camera bag with gear, it's not like I can pack even an extra lens if I have an OM3. So in practicality, there's no difference. So it's purely aesthetics. And, that you would choose. But remember those compromises, right? Also the dual card slot, right? You have dual card slots in the OM1s. So, if I sat here and thought about it, I'd probably think of a few more things. What does the OM3 offer feature-wise that the OM1 does not? Is this movie mode switch, an extra custom setting, so you have 5 custom settings instead of 4. The movie mode switch, this also allows you 5 distinct, you're able to save your movie settings directly into the mode dial, separately from the photo mode. So you can have 5 movie settings that you can save and 5 photo settings that you can save. On the OM1, you can only save 5 photo settings. You can save a few things in the movie thing, but not separately. They'd have to be combined with the photo mode. So you're limited to whatever you can do in photo mode with video versus with the OM3, you can distinctly save settings. Not that there's a ton of different video settings, right? 4K 60 log, 1080p 240, right? Maybe you got 2 different, so you have your slow motion setting in C1, your 4K 60 in C2, things like that. You can do that on this camera. You can't do that on OM1s. If you're a hybrid shooter, you might want that more in a camera like this, but you'd also have to want this aesthetic. Because if you want a really truly hybrid camera, you have to look at Panasonic for video capability, right? You're doing 50-50 video photos. I would steer you towards a Panasonic and not an OM3 just because of this one thing. But this is one thing that this camera can do that the OM1 does not. But I can't think of anything else that it does. Uh, so if you don't care about the looks, get the OM1. If you like how this camera looks, because honestly, the only time I ever took my OM1 out for photography is if I was going to do birding, because it's my most capable birding camera. But I never took it out for photo walks, like going to the park or going out for a walk with Ellie. I always took my Pen F because that was the camera that had that nostalgic look and feel, and um, that's the camera I took because of the aesthetics of the camera, not because of the capability. And the only time and the OM1 is my workhorse. I take that to my photo jobs. Uh, and those have been far and few between lately. But that's my photo job camera and birding camera. But now that the OM3 is extremely capable as a wildlife camera, because it's basically an OM1 Mark II, just a little bit of a cripple hammer there, right? Uh, I don't even take the OM1 out for birding anymore. I may go back to it because of the grip, though. I'm going to go out with the OM3 a bit more. Uh, but for the most part, the OM1 has been delegated to photo jobs only. And even then, I'm doing an event this week, and I'm going to take the OM3 because the OM3, when you're shooting people, uh, they get a kick out of how this camera looks. And when I pair it with that flash right there for my event photography, I'm going to get, I'm going to be much more approachable. You own the fact that you're there taking pictures because you got this big honking flash and this nostalgic camera. And somehow people respond to that differently than if I had my OM1. So for event photography, OM3 all day long. For my commercial property, real estate stuff, it's going to be the OM1 every time because that's just a much more durable camera. I could I could use the OM3, but it's not the same. It's not the same. I don't feel like it doesn't feel like a work camera. Like I wouldn't take it to a job other than events. I wouldn't take it to a job to do serious photography, even though both cameras are equally capable in that respect for that particular purpose. I just wouldn't be able to take my job seriously looking at that camera. But when I have the OM1, I feel a little more serious and more professional because of how it looks, right? Okay, let's see. And Tim Adams, on my EM1 Mark III, I never think to use the joystick. Am I missing out on a good feature? Not really. It took me a while to get used to it. I prefer it now than not having it. So the OM3 doesn't have it. So I miss it a little. I do miss it because I'm really good with the D-pad. And once I got used to using the joystick, I was able to use the D-pad for ISO and and I forget what I programmed them to. I have to look. My memory is terrible. But uh, so I click right. Okay, that's my shutter mode. And then I click down, that's my ISO. And I think up you can't program. And then when I click left, it's for moving the focus point around. So that's if when I have the joystick, this programming the D-pad that way just gives you two extra function buttons to use, right? Uh, and that's why I like the OM1 for my other types of jobs. That said, on my Pen F, I use the D-pad as just moving the focus point only because Pen F has a lot of buttons on it, right? Anyway, so I just use the D-pad for moving the focus point around. But now that I have the OM3 and this is my primary camera, I went back to using the D-pad as a multi-function, right? As a function button. So down is ISO, right is shutter mode, and then left is moving the focus point. So I do get mixed up a little sometimes when I'm trying to move the focus point and I accidentally change the ISO or shutter speed. So I've noticed that in some of my shots where I've made that mistake. But I have to be consistent. My muscle memory, I just can't handle it. In other words, I want to have my muscle memory exactly the same no matter which Olympus camera or OM system camera I use. I have a certain muscle memory for this thumb. So I do miss the joystick though, because now I hope that makes sense. I use the joystick to move the focus point around. I got good at that. And that let me use the D-pad as function buttons. But now that I don't have the joystick, I've decided to keep it the same as I use on my other cameras for consistency and muscle memory. But before that, when I was using my Pen F, I dedicated it to moving the focus point around. Because it's not just moving the focus point, but if you do spot metering, spot high, spot low, uh, it's just easier to move with the joystick and then use the function buttons to adjust other things, right? But I would say not missing much. You can get used to either way. If the OM3 was my only camera, uh, I might go back to using the D-pad as the focus point only, rather than as a multifunction button. But because I have multiple cameras with and without joysticks, I have to keep it consistent for that reason. And good evening, AJ Cooper from Chile 14C in Adelaide. Adelaide. Okay. What is 14C? It was cold this morning. I got my cardigan on. 57. Yeah, it was colder than that here. Uh, it was 48 degrees this morning, which is about nine Celsius. My house is my house this morning was 64. My house this morning was 17 Celsius indoors. I just don't like anything below 72. 70s, when you get below 70, my hands get cold. Getting older, I guess. Okay. But thanks for joining us this morning. And with wildlife, not only does the G9's grip help, but the battery grip is a game changer when using longer lenses, like the Leica 100 to 400. I can't imagine using the 150 to 400 without one. That's a good point. I bought the grip for my OM1, but I've never used it. Um, my initial thought was when I'm doing events, doing portrait mode, I used portrait mode quite a bit, so having the grip allowed me to do portrait mode a lot. But that was the only reason I was thinking about it. I never thought about it for longer lenses. The biggest lens I have is a 300 f4, and I'm perfectly fine the way it is without a grip. And AJ says, got the wooden grip the same as Emily Taupin has, makes a big difference. Yeah, it does. It makes a big difference. Like I said, mostly for me, when I'm doing, when I'm holding the camera, when I'm not shooting, because normally I shoot, but a lot of times I do shoot vertical and I tilt the screen out so I can look down like this. And then I'm holding the camera down low like this, down to the ground. And yeah, it makes a big difference to have the grip. You don't have to have your hand like squeezing that thing so hard that, you get fatigue builds in if you've been out shooting for a couple of hours. And Robin Schaefer, I got your rubber bands. I got them, by the way. Thank you so much. It made a huge difference. But let me read your comment here. It says, for decades, the 35 millimeter cameras were made without a grip, and people managed to hold them just fine. For old guys like me, that is the classic form of the 35 millimeter. Yeah, and the 35 millimeter camera, at least the OM1, OM2, OM3, OM4, they were small cameras to begin with. So, and you weren't shooting sports action wildlife with them generally, I wouldn't imagine. And look at all the Leicas. None of them have grips, as far as I know, except like the SL3 and SL series. But uh, having a grip is better than not having one. But it doesn't mean you can't hold a camera without a grip. You can hold them just fine and shoot just fine with them. But it's those things that I talked about when I'm not taking pictures and holding the camera. This is easier. So let me just share like a picture I did yesterday. I think I put it on my Instagram. I'm not sure. I did not. Uh, it's probably still in my folder. I'm sure I exported it to upload. Uh, I did. Oh, this one. So like this shot, for example, right, is one where I held the camera down low to the ground, below the flowers, right? Tilted the screen down like this, and then held the camera like this, and having the grip made a big difference. It just made it easier to get this shot without fumbling, because otherwise I would be fumbling a lot without the grip. Without the grip, it would be uncomfortable, and I wouldn't been able to experiment or work the scene as much or as comfortably without the grip. Oh, and then the rubber bands. Yeah. Okay, so what Robin sent me was was when I was adapting these 4/3 lenses to my OM1 or whatever micro four thirds camera. This cheap, I paid like 30 bucks for this, I think. This adapter, 4/3 to micro four thirds adapter, because I wanted to use my 50 to 200 f2.8 lens, right? 'Cause this is a great lens, by the way. But there was a lot of play, a lot of wiggle, right? The tolerances or whatever, the machining of the mounts, of this adapter were loose. So I put the lens on and there was just this play. But now, uh, maybe it gives additional weather sealing too, but hopefully you can see that. But there's a little rubber band that I put around behind the lens mount. And now when I mount that onto the camera, man, it's tight, not so tight that it's hard to put the lens on. It's perfect. What an awesome idea. And I put it on both, right? I put it on the lens too. So I have one on the lens and I have one on the mount going to the camera. And now there's no play at all. So hopefully that'll solve some of I was getting some inconsistency. Sometimes the lens would disconnect from the camera uh, because of that play. I think because of the play that's in it. Hopefully it's not because of the electronics, because this has to do it has a little chip in here to do some conversions and stuff, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see if this performs better now that everything's nice and snug. Uh, but these are the rubber bands that I guess you said you get these at a craft store. But that's awesome, man. Thank you so much. That would have never occurred to me, never ever, to do something like that. Okay, and let's see. Uh, MFT is more than large enough except for rare cases. How often is dynamic range really insurmountable problem? Plus, noise reduction is so good, e.g. DXOD prime XD3, that high ISO is no longer a worry. And I think, for most of us as hobbyists, enthusiasts, that is absolutely true. We don't have to worry about, uh, we don't care about dynamic range, or let me rephrase that. I think, well, I don't have to rephrase. You said it perfectly. Dynamic range is not an insurmountable problem. It's not a problem at all. If you expose your images properly, you have wiggle room of two stops in either direction. If you have to make corrections more than two stops, the image can start to look a little processed or artificial, in my opinion. I'm not saying there aren't use cases for having a huge dynamic range, especially when you make mistakes because there's a lot of stories, oh, I have 5 stops of dynamic range. It saved me on this photo job, and I was able to deliver images, without too much problem. These are exceptions to the rule. Generally speaking, what you're saying is absolutely correct. It's not a problem. And noise reduction, again, you know, it DxO does such a good job at demosaicing the raw images and then applying the noise reduction based on its own demosaicing algorithm that it pulls out detail in high ISO files like no other software, in my opinion. And there's an argument that some are saying that, well, they built some AI algorithms into it that add detail that may not have been necessarily there. And even if that were true, it doesn't bother me. I'm not I'm not selling my photography. I just want to get a nice picture that I can enjoy and share with other people. And the noise reduction is so good now that especially I use noise reduction on everything, my base ISO files, my high ISO files, and everything in between. It just cleans all of the images up and gives them a certain amount of polish that make the images so much nicer and so much cleaner. And DxO pulls out the kind of detail. If you need to pixel peep or crop, it gives you a lot of options. I've had to crop so many images of birds. And I know Lee Hoy is like, you know, he's probably cringing now, right? Because Lee doesn't crop at all his images. But, uh, I crop a lot of my images. And being able to use DxO to extract that detail and reduce the noise and do that selectively. I mean, you can get carried away with processing. We'll just leave it at that. But I 100% agree with your comment there. And oops, I'm sorry, I did that one. And I think I just saw that. Oh no, says regarding the G9 Mark II for birding, I've been using one for a while, and while it's a very capable camera, I find focus acquisition in CAF frustratingly slow. Mike Lane made a video on this, and he's right. Okay, so I haven't used the G9 Mark II myself, so I can't speak to that, unfortunately. But I appreciate your feedback there, as I'm sure others. So check out Mike Lane. Mike Lane does a lot of wildlife videos, I think. I think I'm thinking of the right person. I don't watch Mike Lane very much, unless they're talking about Olympus. I thought he was a cannon shooter. If I'm thinking of the same person. Good morning, Michael. Good morning. I'm still enjoying the coffee. I've almost finished that bag of coffee. Michael got me a bag of coffee from the Dominican Republic, I think, and I've been enjoying that for the past few weeks. And DDS says, most MFT lens quality far exceeds the limits of human perception, and 20 megapixels is way more than necessary to make a beautiful print of any size. That's if you're not cropping, yeah, the 20 megapixels will more than resolve what we can actually distinguish. And even with cropping, you have a lot of wiggle room, you know. You just may not be able to print quite as large, but if you take a shot and you do a minor horizon correction and maybe crop it to a certain aspect ratio, but you're not really cropping in to the subject, you can print large with Micro Four Thirds uh, and the lens system that they have with no compromise, because you take in consideration as well your normal viewing distance for large prints, right? Because you're not going to look at a large print like this, right? You're going to have to back up and look at it. And as it gets further away, the less the human eye is going to be able to resolve, right? There's all kinds of science to that, but again, it's really that's what I mean. I'm just kind of over this whole high megapixel thing. Uh, as I was saying earlier. And Darko, good morning. Oh, did my chat just jump all the way up? Yeah, it did. Hold on a second. Let me get caught up again. But I've never been disappointed with any of the lenses I've bought for Micro Four Thirds, with very few exceptions. For whatever reason, the 14 to 150 uh, just turned bad on me. It broke bad. I sold it. It was great when I first got it, but at some point, the quality of the images I was getting out of it were just subpar. I mean, it's to be expected with super zoom lenses like that, like a 10x zoom lens. You can't expect prime level quality. But even with that in mind, I was really disappointed later in the life of that lens. And I don't think because when I look at the images that I had from it when I started out with that lens, they were great. And somehow the images towards the end before I sold it were not so great. So I think I don't know what happened to the lens. Something got out of whack with it. And good morning, Marcia. Good to see you. In Florida, very nice and warm down there. I've kind of ruled out Florida. I wanted to move there for so long, but I've kind of ruled it out because of the just every year I watch you guys, you know, with the hurricanes, and you never know what part of Florida they're going to hit, right? Some get hit more often than others, but yeah, I'm not digging that. I want the last chapter of my life, which I'm getting close to, right? When you kind of hit into your 60s, yeah, your exit's coming up, okay? And I want that chapter of my life to be uh, peaceful with very little worry. I've been that way my whole life generally, but even more so now. I don't want any drama. And Pete Frank says, I think we need to uh, name the mega four thirds, get rid of the micro stigma, which makes it sound inferior. I like full frame too, but mega four thirds is awesome. Okay, I'm with you now. Mega four thirds. That's awesome. It is weird they chose micro, right? Because we had four thirds. That was fine. They just called it four thirds, right? The E500, the E series, right? And then when they went to mirrorless, they called it micro four thirds. That was it's a strange choice. Or not strange, but I would say unfortunate because of where we are now and all the brainwashing with full frame. Uh, Taken on a boat in the ocean dealing with swell. Okay. I'm missing part of that, the context of that statement. And DDS says, I'm heading out to walk dogs now, pausing this and left as my left arm's injured. I'll be using my Sony RX10 for, yes, that's a cool camera. They're, it had been, I don't know why they discontinued that. I thought it was always doing well for them. But this is a bridge camera for those not familiar with the RX10. It's an awesome bridge camera, and they're selling for premium now. Like you're going to still have to pay more than what they cost new to this day for a used one. They're fabulous cameras though. But yeah, enjoy your walk with the dogs, and we'll see you on the back end. And then Jan says, "Damn hard to see while snapping thunder. Remote control for the camera in one hand and umbrella in the other. Rain with hail and cloudbursts make me pull inside to see." Okay, awesome. One of these days, I'll do some storm chasing, get some photography done. Kind of goes against the grain of who I am. Like, I'm not really I'm a fair weather photographer, right? Generally speaking. But it's definitely an area that would be challenging and fun and would make some really interesting images, right? And Tim Adams says 1 month, two cameras had an interesting view. Would love to see her on one of your get-togethers. Yeah, she actually was. She was she was in my stream one day, and she said, "Yeah, I'm a big fan of you." And I'm like, "What?" I had no idea. And she was open to the idea of coming on the channel. So yeah, I'll have to reach out to her before it gets awkward, right? It's like if I wait a year, she'll be like, "Yeah, I was willing to come on a year ago, but not now." Because you know how it is. The longer you wait, things just start to get awkward. Because I'm not like in touch with her other than when she came in the stream that, she's been in the stream a few times as in the chat section, but I haven't seen her in about a month. But yeah, it does get awkward if you wait too long, right? Like Robin was asking to come on for a mid-year meetup, and that was a couple of weeks ago, so I need to get on that. But I have so many, I've had like 3 meetups with ambassadors the past month. Uh, I just wanted to come and talk to you guys directly this week, right? And Andreas is here. Good to see you. Uh, and Pete Frank says, I've used the OM1 for all types of photography. It's excellent. Yes, it can do everything. Like I said, yeah, it does everything. That's all I can say. And Mike Cruz says, I like the tilting EVF on my Sony FX2. Oh, yeah, yeah, I've seen that. Can we have that on one more camera, please? Okay. I remember that was on one of the Panasonics, right? Was it the GX9? Anyway, Panasonic had that too, and a lot of people like that. Shri is here. Hey, Shri. Hopefully, we'll see you tonight. Uh, Shri is going with me for that event to do some photography. Hi, everyone. Hopefully, we will see auroras tonight. Any plan? No, no plans for it. I didn't know there's. I'm not really an aurora guy. I don't pay attention to those things. I should try though. It would be fun. It'd be interesting. I've never seen an aurora. It'd be interesting to see. I guess put that on my bucket list. And Marco says, shot an event last night with the OM3 and the FL900. Worked beautifully, but wanting a smaller flash now for the OM3 kit. TT350O is still the way to go. What's the newest version? You want to get the V350 with the lithium ion battery. The TT350 uh, can be problematic with double A's, not only because of the recycle times, uh, but doing like macro photography, I find that I have a hard time using it any higher than 1/128th, 1/64th power. But before you get too many delays, right? In the shutter when you're doing focus stacking or high res shot mode where there's, any kind of multi-shot type computational feature on the camera. Whereas I believe the lithium ion version, the V350, will not have that issue. I don't have one, so I can't say for a fact. Uh, but yeah, it's the only game in town right now is the 350 from Godox in terms of small, really powerful, relatively powerful flashes. It's the only game in town, but I would step up to the V350. So if I buy another flash, it will be a V350. Right now, Godox, I have like three. I work with Godox directly, and also I have three distributors for Godox constantly wanting me to send me flashes. So I'm just gonna wait until something uh, comes out. Something replaces the 350. Maybe call it the 360. I'm gonna wait because the 350 is getting really long in the tooth, and not that flashes need much upgrades, right? But I would like to see a better user interface, better buttons, because that click wheel is a little janky. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not crazy about the click wheel on it. It's functional, but I'd like to see an improved user interface between the screen and the buttons. So I'm waiting for uh, the replacement to the 350. It may never come, but I hope it does. I am reviewing a couple of new flashes from Godox. These are little tiny flashes, but they're really interesting. I don't know if it's been announced yet, so I can't really say what it is. But it's basically like the FLM3. It just kind of goes on top and it has a lithium ion battery and it has the radio trigger built in. So rather than buying the X3 radio trigger, you can buy a little uh, flash instead because it's about the same size. It's going to sit on top of the camera like this and have TTL capability and X trigger compatibility. So you can use a transmitter and receiver, so you can use it off camera. And it's small. So I don't know why anybody would buy this trigger anymore if you can buy a combo flash trigger, right? So that's coming out soon. So maybe wait altogether and just get one of those because I don't know how bright it is. Probably won't be any brighter than FLM3 in practice, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to get one in. It's 40C in Sacramento. Oh, you're so lucky. 40C. That's got to be like 100 degrees, right? 40C to 104. Yeah. But it's dry. It's a dry heat. I don't mind. I obviously too much, I can get uncomfortable when it's too hot. I'm not saying I love it to be 90 degrees, 90 plus degrees all the time with high humidity, but I can tolerate that a lot easier than being 46 degrees like it was this morning. And I'm talking in Fahrenheit. I can tolerate that a lot better. I don't mind it being hot. The only problem with hot weather is you can't leave your cameras and lenses in the car because you don't want your cameras and lenses to be in 100-degree plus temperatures. It can just, especially lenses, it can really mess things up. Okay, Mark says great idea. Okay, I think that was in reference to maybe the rubber bands. And Eric says I dropped off Fujifilm 400 at Arlington District Camera Friday. Expensive, but I get it. $58 for 2 rolls. Then again, I picked professional digital prints. Okay, so you got prints too, but wow. Yeah, it's no joke, man. Film is expensive. That's why I do have some color film that I'm hesitating to shoot because I know what it's going to cost to get it developed. I bought a color developing kit. I might try that because that's cost effective. In black and white film, I like Tri-X is my favorite black and white, but T-Max is a little cheaper and is also really good. And it's very close to Tri-X in my opinion. And I can develop black and white myself very cost effectively, like $1 a roll or something, whatever. I haven't done the math recently, but I can develop my own black and white. Color, I can also develop. Uh, it's not much harder. You just have to do a couple more things. I gotta do that. I gotta do that soon. Assuming all my chemicals haven't expired yet. I keep them in the fridge, but you never know. Marcus says, do you think those rubber bands would help folks with the 100 to 400 that dislike the rotational play? Maybe. Yeah, try it. I don't know. I didn't hear of any problems with the 100 to 400 like that, but I guarantee it'll fix it if it's the same thing. Yeah. And I picked up a roll of Kodak Ektar 100 after dropping off those. They say it's more saturated, so I'm curious. I really want dark, rich colors. Yep. That should be the way to go. Because Eric was asking about this in another stream. I think one of my photo editing streams or somewhere, but not like on a regular Sunday stream. And Robert's here. Good morning. Good to see you. And I don't know, Robert, you didn't sign up for the event photography we're doing this Thursday. Probably because you have a day job and you can't take off work. But uh, if you can make it Thursday, that would be freaking awesome. If you can make it to the event Thursday. And Robin Wong is here. Hey, Robin, how are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. I will set up something for mid-year, but before it gets awkward, right? And Robin says, I'm still using the Dinosaur Olympus FL50R. Got the 3 of those. I keep telling myself I'll buy new ones. When they die, they just refuse to die. Yeah. Flashes last forever. I got flashes that are like that I bought off eBay that were easily 20 years old already, and they still work. Assuming the batteries didn't get left in them and the corrosion and leak and all of that. If you can get somebody that took care of their flash, they last forever. And P. Frank says, "Hey, Robin, what do you think of the name out there for Mega Four Thirds instead of Micro Four Thirds?" Okay, I'm curious too. I think Mega is a little bit too presumptuous, not presumptuous, but a little bit too. Man, my vocabulary. I can't remember words anymore. I used to have a good vocabulary. It escapes me now. My vocabulary is just not what it was, or I can't remember what it was. And Robin has responded, said, "I think it's a bit too late for a name change. It's been so many years, so people are stuck with Micro Four Thirds for better or worse." Yep, but it can still change, at least in the uh, from a community standpoint, right? For example, uh, I use the word Zoom meeting all the time now. Even though I don't use Zoom, I use Google Meet and I use my Streamlabs for conference calls. But it's really awkward to say I'm setting up a video conference. But if you say I'm setting up a Zoom call, people just kind of associate that with, oh, I can just get on with my phone, or I can, you know what I mean? It's the I think the term of video conferencing has transitioned to the word Zoom. Another example would be like, photocopies. People normally just say make a Xerox copy, but you can say it either way. It means the same thing, even though you're not using a Xerox machine. So if you say Mega Four Thirds, people can come to associate that as Micro Four Thirds just as easily. Uh, and it may become more common to use Mega Four Thirds than Micro Four Thirds at some point. Who knows? It could change, right? Let's see. Anthony said this seems to be a lot of excitement about the 100 megapixel sensor that's in the new drone from DJI. Oh, I haven't heard of that. I don't look at drones because drones are just not allowed where I live. Like 100-mile radius, at least 50-mile radius, I can't use a drone other than one or two very select places, which would be boring as a drone owner, right? Enjoying the chat on a lazy Sunday afternoon. Oh, thank you, Andreas. Thanks for being here. And David Black, good morning from Southern Indiana. The new mini Godox flashes has been announced. Oh, okay, cool. Um, let me just see. Nope, that's not the one they're sending me. I'm just looking online at. Oh, this is it. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I'm gonna get a couple of these coming in. 70. Yeah, this is cheaper than the frickin' Godox X3 trigger. So I don't see any reason to buy an X3 trigger other than the interfaces, other than you have a larger screen on the X3. But you could just buy one of these. And they have the Olympus Panasonic version right here. So I'm going to get a silver one for Olympus and a black one for Canon. Okay. Thanks for the heads up there. Um, Anthony says, I personally think that 100 megapixel sensor is overkill. Low light capability is probably going to be badly affected and probably problems with diffraction as well. Yeah. I mean, I would think on a drone, you're not going to have it set to f16, because you're going to be really far away and wide angle. So you can be like at f2 on a drone all day long and not worry about depth of field, right? So diffraction probably is not an issue, but it depends on the pixel density. I mean, 100 megapixel, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to say anything more, other than I doubt diffraction would be an issue because of the wide angle and distance that you can be at f2 all day long on a drone. Let me see if I can make it to this. We'll DM you tomorrow. Okay. Well, look at the description today on Meetup, okay? There's a link there. I'm holding a meeting tonight, a Zoom meeting. It's not really Zoom, it's Streamlabs, but I'm holding a Zoom meeting tonight to talk about it before the event. So if you can, I really need to know today, ideally. Uh, you can come either way, okay? If you're not going to know until tomorrow because you have to check with work or something, that's okay. You can come either way. But I'm going to assume you're not coming if I don't know today, I have to assume you're not. And I have to because I'm working with the event coordinator. It's a little tricky. Uh, because I have to get everyone's full name, email addresses. Come to the Zoom meeting tonight and I'll explain a little more why it's important. I need to know today. Because it's not an open event, it's a private event and you need passes to get in. Okay. Uh, Ads are so disruptive. I'm sorry, Zach. Um, and Marco says, Uncle Rob, is there a limit on the aperture when using the shutter priority mode on the EM5 Mark II? For instance, I want to limit the f-stop to only f2.8 and not f2. That's a good question. Uh, Not that I'm aware of. What the only workaround would be indirectly by managing the ISO limits. So if you're in a consistent lighting situation, then you can limit your ISO so that the aperture is forced to stay open, if that makes sense, right? So in the auto ISO menu, you should be able to set the limits 200 to say 1600, and that will force the aperture to stay wide open or within a range, right? Because if you set your ISO to 200, now if you're in very bright light, that's going to be a problem, right? Because you're going to have to use faster shutter speeds to adjust for that. So I'm not sure what shutter speeds you need in shutter priority mode, but generally speaking, use faster shutter speeds. That's going to force your ISO and aperture to be, lower and higher respectively. So you're gonna have to work around it a bit, but it can be done. And I would start with limiting the ISO range so that you're minimizing the gain and maximizing the aperture to be larger. They changed the name of my street and we call it by that name. Humans adapt quickly. Yep. Always great to take part in your chats, Rob. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I try. I'm more happy with the sensor that's in my current OM1 Mark II. Yes. I assume versus the previous sensor you had in your other, I can't remember what you had before. But the OM1 Mark II, that new 20 megapixel stack sensor, everyone complains, it's not really a new sensor, or, they didn't increase the megapixels. And I get it. I get that. Everyone would like to see a little more, right? But I wouldn't dismiss the fact that it's now a stack sensor too quickly. It's what allows us to have these 50, 100 frame per second shooting modes and not have a rolling shutter when we're panning for wildlife. It allows us not to have rolling shutter when we're doing videos. And but specifically to photography, not having rolling shutter, let me tell you, my A7R III, when I use silent shutter, I cannot pan at all. Like if the subject's moving, forget it. I'm gonna get, slanted lines on that camera. So having a stack sensor, I think was a nice jump in in the camera all by itself. Because I prefer to use silent shutter whenever possible. I only use mechanical shutter if I have to do flash photography, and that's only if I have to be faster than a hundredth of a second. If I can use flash with the hundredth of a second or slower sync speed, I'm going to use electronic shutter. Um, okay, but yes, I'm very happy too. Alan Gamble says, "Hi Rob, I recently replaced my M5 Mark III with the OM5. The menu in the OM5 has changed slightly, and I cannot locate the light box feature." Ooh, I don't know. I don't have an OM5, but yeah, it's probably been dropped because I never used it. I vaguely remember what you're talking about, where you have two images side by side, right? I haven't seen that feature. I've never used that feature, so yeah, I don't have a feel for when that got dropped. If it was in the M5 Mark III, yeah, sorry. If I had an OM5, I could probably help you with that directly, but I don't. Is there a good way to avoid the focus hunt in the 40 to 150 f2.8? The best way is uh set your focus limiter if that makes sense in the workflow. So if you're doing wildlife, not necessarily birding, but wildlife where the creatures like are less than 50 yards away, right? I would use a focus limiter to try to minimize that. And let's see. That's the only thing I can think of. Maybe Robin Wong might have some ideas on that. I wouldn't use the single focus point. I would use small. So it gets a little more area to bite into for looking for contrast. Because phase detect also relies on contrast, right? To some extent. So I would use a small focus point rather than I would use small focus point instead of single, assuming we're talking about the OM1. And yeah, limit your focus range if possible. Those are the only two things come to mind. I don't know if either of those would be helpful or not. Because if you're using all points with some kind of subject detection, we're not talking about small focus points anymore. And if if you want maximum versatility and range close to far, you can't use focus limiting, right? But I find in most cases you will be able to use the focus limiter uh, and assign that to a button, and you can switch between different ranges on the focus limiter. Like I started using it on the macro lens and limiting the range to 0 to zero point 0.3 or zero point 0.4 meters rather than just, using focus limiter on the lens itself. So use the focus limiter in the camera and limit the range. And I found that helped a lot with the focus hunting that I got on my 60 macro. And Anthony said, I'll soon have the 12 to 100 f4 in my hand. Yeah, that's an awesome lens. It's an awesome lens. Uh, and 2RC, the first mirrorless Olympus was the EP1. It was a small body with small lenses compared to the DSLR full frame and even for third cameras. Micro, not such a good choice. Ah, maybe that's why. I never gave it much thought, the word micro four thirds, but How often do you use high resolution mode, pixel shift? All the time. I would say at least 50% of the time when I go out to do photos, I use high res shot mode. Uh, Now, the question is it a regular part of my workflow? It's not really. It's not like something I think about. I'm going to go out and do high res shot mode, and I'm going to be set up and prepared for that. I do sometimes landscape, but uh, like I went out on a photo walk yesterday, and I wasn't thinking about high res shot mode, but there was a couple of times that I was given the opportunity to shoot high res shot mode, and I did. So I do use it time to time. So let me go back to my images. I don't know if I exported any high res shots. I don't think I did. Oh, this one is a high res shot, but I didn't export it as a high res image. This is a 4 megapixel image because I was sharing it, and you can't share ginormous But this is a shot where I used high res shot mode, and because this kind of image lends itself to fine detail, right? Because I want to see the brickwork, the windows, the texture and the curtains, the individual leaves in the tree, all of that stuff. But I've downsized this to 4 megapixels. But even as a 4 megapixel image, this image is only 2000, so it's a 5 megapixel image. I'm sorry. 5.33 megapixels. Even as a 5 megapixel image, I can still see the brickwork and detail in here. Let me see. Yeah, I'll try and pull up the original resolution image. Let's see. This one, no, this was not a high res shot. Hmm. Some of these are from the Sony because I'm testing a new lens. This is part of my new film simulation. See if I can show this while I'm looking for the other one. So this image on the left is my Chrome simulation, and the image on the right is just a straight out camera, basically. It's probably impossible to tell looking at it through a live stream. But there are some very distinct differences between these two images in terms of color, uh, which may not be obvious until I zoom all the way in. But you can see how this is a little bit warmer over here versus this image on the right. And then if we go to the blue parts, you can see the blue on the left here is a little less saturated than the blue on the right. Okay. So there's some very, very subtle differences here that if you were looking this on your own computer screen, you would see a very distinct difference between the two images, but it's very hard to tell here in the stream. And there's a lot of noise in here because I shot this intentionally at 30 ISO 3200, which I talked about early in the stream, where I'm trying to maintain sort of a grainy color film look. And let me go to Photo Lab. Let's go down to that image. It's a JPEG. Okay. It's before, oh, here it is. It's a little crooked. I think this is it, right? Yeah, this is a 50 megapixel. So this is the straight out of camera JPEG, but you can see how much nicer the brickwork is on the 50 megapixel image. Now I'm zoomed in at 400%. But like the window curtains here, I can see very distinct detail and the brickwork. Uh, I was talking about the individual leaves in the trees. There was probably a little bit of wind, so the detail on the leaves are not going to be quite as distinct as say something that's not moving. Like I can see there's blinds here on this window, and not that it matters when you actually look at the image from a normal viewing distance and looking at the full frame. What difference does it make that there's blinds in this window? But this is a situation that I felt like, yeah, this would be the perfect opportunity to use the handheld high-res shot mode and just get that little bit of extra detail. Let me see if this any of these other shots are not. This is a regular 20 megapixel shot. Let's see if I have another one. Let me see this one. No, that's high-res shot. How about this one? Unfortunately, I don't have a good image to compare, but let's get to the same. But you can see the difference. High-res shot here. This image here is at a much higher ISO, so there's some grain and noise in there. But yeah, I love high-res shot mode for doing things like this. Like I can almost make out the screen in this image here, uh, but not really. That's just not happening. But definitely the fine brickwork. There's a big difference here. Okay, so that's that. Um, Due to tariffs, apparently all camera and lens manufacturers are raising their prices after 26th of June. By how much, nobody knows. Yeah, time will tell. Let's see. And Adam Farr says hunt all the way out of focus before it cycles back and locks focus. Yeah, there's another setting in the camera called AF scanner. Try playing with those settings as well. I typically have AF scanner turned on. It may be only on or off in the OM1. So I set it once and I forget it, but I believe I have that turned on. Maybe try turning that off and see if that makes a difference. The AF scanner. Because AF scanner, the idea is that if it doesn't lock focus initially or quickly, it then scans all the way to infinity, comes back to minimum focus, and then looks for something in between. Something like that. I don't know if it remembers where it had the most contrast and goes back to that point. So that's why it goes all the way in and out in scan mode and then can come back to that point later. I don't know the exact methodology that the camera uses in AF scanner mode, but you can set that on or off. And I think in the EM1 Mark III and other cameras, you can actually adjust. There might be some additional settings for AF scanner mode. And Thomas is here. Good morning. Late to the show this morning. It was beautiful in Atlanta, Georgia, 20 Celsius, 14 dew point. Not to go on a morning photo. Yes, I'm glad you were able to get out. It was too cold for me. Like I said, we were like 8 or 9 Celsius here this morning. I ain't doing that. Even in my house right now, it's actually starting to warm up in here, but I don't like it when it gets below 70 degrees. And my old camera was the Olympus EM1 original. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a big step up from your OM1 Mark II. And by the way, your live chat with Lee Hoy was extremely informative. I watched the repost and took a lot of notes. Yeah, me too. I took a lot of notes during the stream. He had a lot of great tips in there. Uh, and then Adam Fars, also, any luck with oh, no, not yet. That was just Friday, right? That we talked about that, so they haven't gotten back to me. Uh, Probably not till later this week, right? So definitely by the next stream on Friday, though, I'll know one way or the other. And Tim Adams says, my EM1.3 has a large screen square on the LCD that I can't move around the screen by touch. It's not the little focus square. What the heck is it? It's probably, well, there's two things it could be. I don't have the M1 Mark III anymore, but there's a handheld assist function that you should turn off. This would be, I don't think it's green, but it's a box with a little dot inside that moves around. That's called the handheld assist feature. Make sure that's turned off. Number two is it could be the magnify feature, and I would I would go into you don't it's probably have a button assigned to magnify, and that's what's happening. Uh, but magnify button you can typically move around by touch, but there's some other variables there that might not allow you to move it around by touch. So make sure it's not the magnify green square because there's the focus point, right, that I'm moving around like this. And then I think there's the magnify, but I can move the magnify. Um, this is different than the focusing square. Not very different, but it's a little bit different. I don't know. It's a little bit different. But if I touch the screen like this and then do the magnify, see now I can't. I should put a lens cap on this so it's easier to see. I'll just hold it this way. But now I can't move this green square around, right? But so there's a couple of things you have to try, but I would check the magnify feature and then the handheld assist feature. Let me see what the handheld assist feature looks like. I never use that, so I don't even know where it is in the menu because I never use it. I should check the chat because you might have already responded. Here it is. Let me turn this on. So there's a handheld assist feature. It kind of looks like that, but it's not green, so you're probably not talking about this. But that's another one that I get questions about, like how do you get rid of that? Just turn the handheld assist feature off. Sorry, Tim, that's the best I can do on answering that. Uh, because nothing else comes to mind what a green square would be doing in the only other thing I can think of is maybe you have it on spot metering, in which case, but those would be like brackets. You wouldn't have a square, you would have brackets. So it couldn't be that. Okay, sorry, I can't think of anything else. So I need to get out and try shooting slower, more deliberate, maybe pick several themes or subjects to always look for. What say you guys? Uh, it's all relative, you know? I would say it depends what your goal is, right? I assume what's prompting this question is you're not happy with the images you're taking. So you want to try a different approach, be more deliberate, right? And then that makes a lot of sense. Uh, Yesterday, when I went out, I took a lot of pictures and I was working the scene and I wasn't trying to be deliberate about anything. I took several pictures of the same scene from different angles. So I'm moving pretty quickly. I'm not being very deliberate in the individual image, but I'm being very deliberate about that scene, right? So I'm going to get a good shot from this particular scene. I want to get a good shot. So let me try different angles, different, different distances, different focal lengths. So I was trying a lot of different things. And so I was being deliberate in that sense, but not deliberate for an individual image. So think about it that way, right? Um, don't think about how did you word it? Shooting slower. Shooting slower is not necessarily going to improve your photography. I think the key thing here is being very deliberate about your photography. What is it you intend to do? So because there's this one location that there's many actually, but I'll go to a location that I've shot and I've never been happy with the image that I got of that scene. So every time I go back there, I try a lot of different things. And then I come back and I look at the 20 or 30 images I took, and then I see if there's any there that I like. And I'll say, okay, I want to explore this a little bit more. And this actually happened yesterday. I was looking at an image and I was like, this one actually looks pretty good. Next time I go out, I'm going to be more deliberate about capturing this particular angle or shoot with this particular focal length or whatever it was. I can't remember now. I can't remember now what it was, but one of the images that I took yesterday, after being relatively speedy, right? I wasn't being slow and deliberate. Wasn't being slow, I should say. I was being very deliberate about getting different angles of this. And something clicked on one of the images. So next time I go back there, I'm going to be very deliberate and slow down and really think about that particular scene. Uh, for example, this is not a good example, but when I was shooting looking straight up with the flowers in front, I shot very quickly 3 or 4 frames. I shot one where, let me see if I can find it. Is Yeah, we're still good. Okay. I had it right here. Give me a second. It's coming. Why am I into the RAWs? I shot RAW plus JPEG. Here it is. Here it is. So you can see I took, what is that? That is 18 images of this one scene. So the first image I took, now that I found it, I can come down a bit. So the first image I took, I missed the flowers altogether. The second image I took, I got the flowers in and I centered the building in the frame, but I didn't like these flowers. Anyway, I kept going, going, going. And I think the one I picked as my final image, like I took this one and this 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 leaf here was in the way and blocking the building. But I was thinking, okay, do I focus on the flowers or do I focus on the building? Because in this scene, the flowers are in focus, but the building's out of focus. And then in this scene, the building's more in focus, but then the flowers are out of focus. It's a little hard to tell in the live stream. So this last image down in here, now I'm shooting at f16 instead of f8 because I thought f8 might be enough. But then I can see the flowers are in focus, the building is kind of in focus, but then when you get up close, you can see that it's actually not quite in focus, a little out of focus. So what did I learn from this particular, like, it's not the perfect example. There's another shot that I was going for. But in this example, I'm thinking, okay, first of all, my problem is I'm shooting in landscape mode, like, wide mode. So what I need to do next time is tilt the camera this way and point it up. Because what I was doing in that, I was holding the camera this way and pointing up. What I should have done is go this way and point up. So that's the next thing I'm going to try. The other thing I'm going to do is I can see that even at f16, I'm not getting enough depth of field to get everything in focus. And I didn't like how it looked with the flowers in focus and the building out of focus and vice versa, where the building's in focus but the flowers are. I didn't like either of those. So what I'm going to do now is bring a small tripod, like tabletop tripod, uh, shoot vertical, and do focus stacking, right? And so that that's I lost my chat window. Sorry, give me a sec. So that's what I mean about being deliberate. So being deliberate, I think, is key. Shooting slow is, you know, slowing down and stuff. Everybody says that slow down and take your time, think about the scene, look at the work. I think that makes sense, right? It's certainly an option, but it's not necessarily the case. I think being deliberate is much, being deliberate, experimenting, uh, is much more important. And I'm making a big assumption about why are you asking this question. I'm assuming it's because you're not happy with your images or you want to improve, your photography, that kind of thing. Okay. May pick several themes. So this again is also just coming back to your question, picking several themes or subjects, always to look for. Again, if you're thinking about doing a series of photos, let's say of trash cans, I don't know, whatever, pigeons. Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, those come to mind because I've probably seen them on YouTube or something, right? But yeah, that makes sense, right? And then you take several images, but they work better as a theme or a group of images that you show all together at once or in a book or whatever. That in of itself, the individual images may not be that great, but collectively it makes a really nice portfolio of images. But I think you need to look beyond that. If you want to really improve individual photos, you have to be very deliberate. And Mark Wolf has asked, anyone here used the portrait picture mode of the Olympus cameras? I've done it a couple times. It just works on the skin tones a little bit, and maybe it looks a little softer. Not really, but uh, no, I post-process all of my portrait images. As far as using e-portrait mode on other types of stuff, I haven't tried it. That's interesting, though. I'll have to try it and see if I can make anything out of it that would be more interesting than not using, say, natural. I can move the green square around. So yeah, it's gotta be the magnify square, not the focus square. Although it will focus on that square, but it's not the same as the focusing point. They're different, although they're very similar. Adam says, rarely use HDR anymore, except when I know backlit areas has detail I want. Seems like a newer sensor is enough range to resolve the regular shooting. Yep, it is. I mean, I only do high-res shot mode either to, just get a little bit extra detail. It's not dramatic. Or if I want to reduce the noise in the scene, uh, it does make a difference. Sound like zone focus. Yes, when we were talking about focus limiting, yeah, that's zone focus. And any lens regrets, 7 to 14 f2.8, had to have it, rarely use it. No, not really. Every lens I bought, other than the 14 to 150, but if you're talking about lenses that I've bought and rarely use, it'd be the 8 mm fisheye. But I don't regret having it. When I do use it, I really enjoy it. Trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think so. So, let me take a 2 minute break here, and then I'll be back. So, like they used to say, smoke them if you got them, but don't smoke. It's bad for you. But I need to take a 2 minute break. I'll be right back. And it gives a very interesting perspective. I don't have any regrets, I don't think. Let me look at my lens cabinet. Hmm. I don't know. I like every single lens. Uh, but I'm very picky about lenses that I buy. And for example, I've not bought the 7 to 14 2.8 because I'm thinking, I, I know it's a really nice wide angle lens. It's probably their best lens. It's a pro lens. It's a great lens, but uh, I have a 7 to 14 Panasonic f4, and even with its flaring, purple blobbing problems that can happen, if I traded and got the 7 to 14 2.8, I think I would regret doing that because the problems with the 7 to 14 Panasonic are not that severe for me. I've learned to kind of work around it. The 12 to 100 is a lens that I have not bought, but I suspect I would regret buying it uh, because I'd rather shoot a prime And I have a 12 to 40, and I have the 40 to 150 kit lens. So I have the 12 to 40 Pro and 40 to 150 kit lens. So buying a 12 to 100 would be a nice all-in-one solution, especially for events. But I rarely need to go beyond 40 millimeters even for events. Because in most events, I can just walk up to. I can walk up to the person or people or group and get closer, which is always better than using a zoom. And then when I'm doing like stage events where I don't can't get that close, it's a 75 millimeter prime or even the 40 to 150 kit lens. So the 12 to 100 just doesn't have a place for me in anything that I do, really. Even though I have no trouble recommending that lens, it's super sharp, dual sync stabilization, it's a great range, but it just overlaps what I already have. So the 40 to 150 2.8, another spectacular lens, but I'm happy with the 40 to 150 kit lens. So there's a lot of lenses I don't buy that I would probably regret buying because I already have alternatives that I'm happy with. And Robin says, when you want to shoot more deliberately, I will use a vintage manual lens. It makes you slow down, getting the f-stop and manually focusing and seeing depth of field. Yep. Now, in situations where, what would be a situation I want to shoot more slowly? I guess, it would make sense like if I was going into an area that I'm not familiar with, right? And exploring something new. Yeah, maybe not rush out and just take as many pictures as you can and work a scene. Slow down and look at a scene and think about it and work it slowly and deliberately. That would make sense if I was exploring a new area. But I would say 99% of the time at this point, I'm always going back to the same area, same spot, you know, and shooting the same things over and over again. So my approach is still deliberate, but it's not slow. Uh, but I think it makes sense to shoot slower if you're going to a new area. But everybody's different. That's just how I would approach it. But anyway, yes, maybe shoot like using film. Yep. And Darko asks, "What, Rob? What do you use the R8 for mainly?" Nothing. I don't think I've shot more than 100 shots on that camera. It's a really nice camera, though. Takes beautiful pictures and has a lot of capability. It's very comfortable. I have it paired with the 24 to 105 kit lens, and I got a really good deal on it. So it's really it's really a perfect full frame setup. And I think it quite possibly, if I want to talk about regrets, the R8 would be one of my regrets buying that camera because it doesn't offer me anything I can't do already with everything else I got. For the money I spent on that, I would have rather bought, at this point when I think about it, the Panasonic S1R, the first one, with a 50 millimeter prime and a 35 millimeter prime. Like get a couple lenses, and I would be much happier with that camera than the R8. The trade-off being that the S1R is a freaking tank, right? But I'm gonna take the R8 out. I've been contemplating getting the 800 millimeter f11 and seeing what I can do with that. Because I can get the 800 millimeter f11 for about 600 bucks used in mint condition for now, but I gotta wait. Things are just a little bit tight because I bought that and the Leica, and I don't regret buying the little Deluxe 8. I love that little camera. But the R8, I have some regrets. I have some regrets because it just doesn't attract me in any way to use it other than being a supremely, it's a it's such a very good setup for the money. If you want a full frame camera that's ergonomic, takes incredible photos, has a ton of features, I can't think of anything that beats the Canon R8, with the 24 to 105 kit lens. That is a spectacular full frame setup for the money. You can get that for like 1,500 bucks. The kit lens with that Canon R8, amazingly capable camera for low light, landscape, anything that you'd want to do with that, just about. Amazing video features. So I was thinking about maybe getting the 35 or the 28 millimeter lens for it. Because if you put the little pancake 28 millimeter on there, you have like the perfect full frame street setup. So it just the camera appealed to me because of how excellent it is. Okay. In terms of its, for what it is. But when I have the OM3 sitting here that I just love, this is the camera I'm gonna I mean, where's my R8? So first of all, let me just show you the back. See how this slants in? This grip, this is what makes the R8 so comfortable to hold. Also really nicely rounded here around the shutter button. So ergonomically, and I have small hands, this camera fits my hand like a glove. So that, when it came out a couple years ago, I almost bought it right off the shelf. Like the way now the memory card is shared behind this door with the battery, but the memory card, I don't know, it just the way it clicks in and out, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit raised. I don't know. This is an excellent camera, and I'm really impressed with it. And I think for the money, this is excellent. But yeah, look at this camera compared to, say, my OM3. I mean, when I go out, what camera am I going to have more fun with? What camera am I going to enjoy more when I'm out in the field? And this camera is certainly way more there, right? This could be any, if I cover this part, this could be an R5, an R10, an R7, R8, whatever. If you cover this part where it says R8, other than this little part right here, this is different. No other Canon has this particular grip. But anyhow, uh, yeah, I haven't used it for anything. Honestly, I'd rather take out my Nikon DF, which is my other full frame camera, than this one, because the DF has some character to it with the vintage lenses and things. But this is such an excellent camera. So I don't, I wouldn't say I regret buying it, but I regret buying it when I did. I don't think I would regret buying it if I had waited a little bit. I kind of jumped the gun on this a little too soon. Okay. Uh, Financially speaking, I jumped the gun. I really cannot afford to spend the money I did on that, whatever it is. Said I hate all those little green squares, so I use the zone focus with one decent sized square I can move around. Often I focus and recompose. Yep. And the R8 seems to be like the original Z5 on its relationship to camera like up of Canon to Nikon. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like the Z5 because it's slightly more compact than that. But once you start tacking the lenses on, it's not so compact. I mean, even this is like a f7. I forget what the aperture is. It's pretty high. I have a polarizer on here. It's like f7 to f9 or some ridiculous high aperture. But even then, it's pretty sizable, this lens, compared to say any micro four thirds lens. Like the 14-150 is a lot smaller. I don't think this is weather sealed, this camera and lens combo though. I don't know. I didn't, I, you know, like I'm a fair weather photographer, so I don't check for weather sealing when I buy camera gear. Uh, but this camera is so comfortable to hold and it's so capable. And of course, the image sensor is excellent. There's just very little to complain about this camera. Battery life's a little weak, but carry a couple of spares, you'll be all right. Um, anyhow, Rob, speaking of the 8 millimeter fisheye, when you defish it, how much of the image do you lose? What is the equivalent rectilinear view? It's still around 8 millimeters. When I compared it against my Panasonic 7 to 14 millimeter, and then I defisheyed the 8 millimeter, right, and made it rectilinear, it was still wider than the Panasonic 7 to 14. So uh, you don't really lose your field of view. You do lose some. 8 millimeter fisheye, that field of view is 180 degrees, right? Corner to corner, not horizontally or vertically, but corner to corner is 180 degree. So already has a super wide field of view. A 7 millimeter rectilinear lens does not have a 180 degree field of view. Whatever that number is, it's not 180. So you can't compare fisheye lenses with the same focal length to rectilinear lenses. They have different fields of view, even though the focal length is the same, right? So, but to answer your question, a deep fisheye 8 millimeter image is actually wider than a 7 millimeter rectilinear lens that I have, just a little bit. But you do lose that 180 degree field of view when you defisheye it. I just don't know how much, but it's still just as wide as any 8 millimeter rectilinear lens. Yes, we forget about focus stacking for landscape. Yeah, so like that building image, right? Focus stacking makes sense. With the most camera vol, you can change the size of the square. Yes, with most cameras, you can change the size of the square. Yes, if not all. And just got back, so I don't know if this is still live. I'm back at 125, but RE film simulations, who cares if it matches specific emulsion? Exactly, it's the look that matters, however you get it. Yes. Yeah, so many people, I just wanted to dispel the myth that you can, I wanted to kind of make clear. Not that, but your point about, yeah, who cares if it emulates, if you like the look, you like it, right? If you like the color science that you dial in, the recipe, who cares what film simulation stock it might emulate? Paul says, have the 7 to 14, part of my travel kit with the 14 to 140. Use it a lot in the cities for extra field of view, but I do have to watch the flaring if the sun is out. Yes. Fisheye, wide angle lenses are prone to that, right? Yes, it's a focus square. Thank you, thank you. Oh, okay, you're welcome. I'm glad I was able to help with that. And had the slip outs of catching up on the Mega Four Third, it's worth remembering that 35 millimeter cameras were miniature when they were introduced. Yep. So that took probably the timeline for that to change was probably a little bit longer, but things do change. And Markville says, I have the 14 2.5, the 25 1.7, but I want one compact lens for travel, the 12 to 35 2.8, or the Ollie 12 to 45 f4 seem nice, but too expensive and heavy for me. Should I go back and rebuy a kit lens instead? Yes, the 14 to 42 Easy Zoom kit lens. It's perfect. The 12 to 32 Panasonic kit lens, also very nice. So I would recommend the 12 to 32 Panasonic over the Easy lens. You get a little wider field of view. That's may or may not be that's not as big a deal as the Olympus Power Zoom does. People have been having problems with it, including myself, where the lens ribbon cable inside breaks or whatever, and you have to buy another one. You can get a repair, but it's cheaper to buy another one. Now that said, when I replaced my original one that I bought with my EM10 Mark II, no, I bought it. Yeah, my EM10 Mark II came with the 14 to 42 power zoom, if I recall correctly. Um, that after a few years broke, but since then it's probably been 4 or 5 years. I've had my new 14 to 42 power easy zoom, no problems at all. But I really liked the 12 to 32 Panasonic because it's also very compact and you don't have the power zoom issue. Okay, at Rob Trek, DxO Photolab question, how do I get a small preview window back in the noise reduction menu? It's just showing the noise reduction option and not the preview. Not sure how to hit that. It's not, there's not a window. It's basically, uh, it's this loop button here. So you click on this up here when you go to develop. Because if I'm like in the normal photo library, it's not there. But if I click on an image to develop, I can click there. I can apply noise reduction, for example, and now I'm seeing it, right? Okay. If there isn't a small window somewhere on the side, I'm not aware of it, but you have to use that loop tool. Uh, some 35 millimeter lenses were small too. I have the 200 f2.8 Canon FD, and it's smaller than my Panasonic 200 2.8. Yep, but it does have. Yeah, I have a 200 f4, which is pretty small, a Nikon 200 f4, and but that's manual focus, vintage. Yep. And most of the OM lenses, the OM50 1.8, the OM24 2.8, uh, the 1.8, these were all pretty common lenses, almost pancake size anyway. And rough track, I mean the right column menus. Oh, okay. So in that case, key does this. I think that's what you mean. So hit the F9 key and both windows will come in and out. But if you want to do an individual window, there's a tiny, tiny arrow right about in the middle on the side. Okay. Uh, I have buttons for different options used to have small window above the buttons. Oh, okay, okay. So this is what Mark was talking about. Uh, so this is what you're getting, right? Is something like this. Yeah, just click on any of the tabs up here, and that should open it back up. But if you disable that, then you get this. Another thing you have to look out for is like this favorites button and uh this button here just shows like if I change the exposure and then I click this, the only thing that's going to show is the exposure. If I change, say, a selective tone, now these two show up. So this is showing only tools that you used and none of the tools that you don't use. So disable that. And then if I have uh, settings that I like to use over and over again, I might make them a favorite, in which case, if I click on that, only the favorites will show up. But yeah, I think what you're referring to is when you get this, but you want this. I think that's what you mean. I'll send you a screenshot with annotation. Okay, that would be best. But those are the only things I can think of. Looks like you don't have the preview editor either. Maybe they removed it in DX08 and newer. Oh, you're talking about, I think I know what you're talking about. Are you talking about this window here let me, you're talking about this window here on the left? This move zoom window? So when I zoom in, I can move around? So if I click delete, view, there's also workspace, DxO advanced. You can try this, try that, or where is it? View, live review. Yeah, view live review. I think that's it. No. Well, yeah, just send me an annotation. That's the only other thing I can think of is maybe this little move zoom window. Okay. If that's not it either, just send me something. Let's see. I'll send you a screenshot. Looks like you don't have. Okay. All right. So I think that's it. I think I'm all caught up with the chat, so I'll call it here. Plus, I'm getting hungry. So thanks everyone for coming in today. I really appreciate it. You joining me this morning. And as always, I'll be back on Tuesday for a shopping live stream. I have some deals, and as always, your support is greatly appreciated through memberships and donations. I'll have all those links down below of this stream. Um, but either way, I hope to see all of you again soon.